Hola a todos. How are we doing? Welcome to Chapter 9 Questions. Chapter 9 is relatively straightforward, not too complex compared to a bunch of other chapters we've had so far this semester. So let me get to your questions. The text states that a characteristic frequently found among salespeople who fail are people that have a lot of debt. How can the firm determine if this occurred beside an exit interview? Well, you can't determine that prior to an individual becoming an employee. But once they're an employee, if you have their social security number, you can run a credit check. You just run it through Experian and the other firms. If you see anomalies, maybe you can address them, bring them up, get them financial coaching. But what happens is that if the salesperson's only caring about their commissions and they're not developing relationships, they're just selling because they want the commission so they can pay down debt, we have a disconnect perhaps with firm culture and what the salesperson is doing. What kind of interview questions do you feel are better? Structured or unstructured? It really depends on the situation. I will be honest and say that I'm a bigger fan of unstructured interviews. I think following too much of a format, you don't get enough of a reveal from the individual. I like to see where a conversation will go. I don't like scheduling an interview with 5 questions and only those 5 questions. I tend to have a general outline. I tend to have things that I want to ask, but I tend to do it in an unstructured manner. I hope that helps. The book discusses an increased use of social media as a tool for recruiting potential candidates. What are some methods you have seen you feel will become the new recruiting tool? That's easy. LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn Premium. We've never had a tool like this ever. In the past, recruiting firms used to develop their own proprietary databases, and they would build it and they would, spend immense amounts of time and energy. Now, every recruiting firm pays LinkedIn somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 a month. They have access to the entire database, so all they do is send emails out to individuals all the time. I got this offer. What do you think? It's like constantly having Google search available at your fingertips, but you get to see everyone's resume. It's an incredibly powerful tool. The multi-departmental nature of team selling that has been described earlier in the book. Team selling. Therefore, could the persons who perform the job analysis of the job and the preparation of the job description come to involve more than only either the sales manager or a member of the personnel department or an outside consultant? I think it's pretty hard. Sometimes it's an outside consultant, depending if it's a very specialized scenario. But it's very difficult, particularly for a sales scenario. The sales manager with someone from HR that has a good feel for what they're the only people that really have the skills to know what a good job description would be like. I can't think of an example off the top of my head that the sales department did not write up the job description. Maybe they got some help from HR. I think it's pretty rare that HR does it alone. Maybe HR does all the groundwork, but they do it after they have an interview with the sales manager. Then HR does something, sends it back to the sales manager, and he or she okays it. I don't see it happening outside of that chain of command, so to speak. If not, is it only ever one of the 2 parties before the job to other parties? Now, let me see, maybe this is where you're getting at. Because it's team selling, could there be someone from engineering on the team? Yes. Could there be someone from operations? Yes. Could there be someone from either finance or marketing? Yes. If that's the case, would they be involved? Perhaps, but if they're just one member of the team and the team is formed primarily by the salesperson or the sales manager, then I don't know how much anybody else needs to be involved. Aptitude tests. Do firms, when hiring new salespeople, is a greater weight placed upon experience or trainable potential? Please forgive me for saying this, but it depends. Now, if the firm is bigger and the firm has an internal sales management training department and they spend a lot of time and energy and resources on training, then I would lean in this direction. If the firm is smaller and they don't train and they don't have internal people to train, then this is a bigger deal. So you could say a moderating variable in this equation is firm size and resources for training. One of the concerns noted regarding tests is that the results of a test for measuring ability in a particular type of job may not be applicable for another job. True? Does this suggest that companies that use tests do not create their own tests? Very few firms create their own test. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head and I can't. There are many off-the-shelf psychological profiling, Myers-Briggs type exams that you pay a licensing fee or you pay a one-time fee. You pass out a survey, they show you how it's scored. Sometimes the firm even does all the scoring for you. But the firms, when it comes to a battery in the screening process, these are all off-the-shelf tests. The other upside for them being off-the-shelf tests is usually the firm providing the test gives you norms and ranges, expectations. If you develop your own instrument, you implementing that instrument, sure, you get a score, but how does that score compare to previous scores of people that you hired and people that you didn't hire? There's no norms, there's no set of statistics that you can apply for that. It's another big advantage for the off-the-shelf. As an international student, we're going to graduate from school soon. When we look for our first job, we're lacking work experience, which is a primary factor when employers recruit new employees. So can you give us some suggestion to make up this shortcoming? Well, I know it's difficult here in the United States to get a work permit to have an internship, even if it's unpaid. There are some loopholes, but it's still very difficult. My other suggestion is while you're an MBA student, you work on many individual projects. Perhaps listing these on your resume. It's not like you work for a company, but you worked on a project for some company. Particularly if you take the marketing research class when you have a semester-long project with a client. That is work experience, and it is something you can put on your resume. If not, graduate, take a short-term 6-month position somewhere where you get a internship, and then you go to work from there. You interview again. Please explain selection procedures. Well, I'm assuming you're referring to the stuff on page 306 and 307. If you want to shoot me a more specific question, perhaps I can answer it, but this is kind of broad and is not very helpful at the moment. So please, shoot me another question. What specifically about selection procedures I can be helpful with? How do you feel about credit checks during the application process? Now, during the application process, this is kind of intrusive. I'm not giving anyone my social security number unless I'm an employee. That's a very, very, very important piece of data. If I'm not the applicant, then why would I give them my social security number? It seems a little weird. If a physical examination can only be given after an offer is made, at this point, why does it matter? Why would a company waste the money on something that they inevitably can't control? As per the text, a candidate cannot be fired based on the results. I agree with all your line of reasoning in this question. But say you give a physical examination, right? And you discover something. You're helping your employee out. You know, maybe they haven't had a physical examination in a while. And you can give them a heads up and head something off at the pass before it gets real serious. From the employer's perspective, physical exams are good because it helps you plan. You may not be able to control it, but you could potentially plan for it. If you hire 8 people and 7 of them are hypertensive, overweight, stressed, then you might have to think about what kind of health plans that you're paying into, because there's a high potential you might have a problem with one of your employees. And if you don't have the right coverage, the employer could be paying out of pocket. Why in smaller firms the top-level sales manager commonly view recruitment selection process as their primary responsibility? Because it has to be. In smaller firms that are more flat, there isn't as many employees, the top-level sales manager does more. In larger companies, the lower-level managers are responsible for recruiting and selecting because, A, the top-level managers have other things that they need to do, but really, the salespeople, because there are more levels of sales managers, the salespeople that they're recruiting them into a lower level. So the lower level managers are looking for people that can also work on their level. Now, in a larger company, if they were trying to hire a senior VP of sales, well then the top level sales managers would be involved. But in a larger company, if they're doing entry level stuff, the entry level sales managers can help with recruiting and selecting. Or be very involved with it with less oversight from the top-level sales managers. Why do firms still cut corners on selling, particularly when turnover is high? Because of short-sightedness, because the balance sheet, there is cash flow issues, and they're cutting everywhere. Some firms make decisions that they seem like they're okay, it's a short-term fix, but it creates longer-term problems. And it could be cutting corners on selling, it could be cutting corners on recruiting and selecting, it could be cutting corners on customer service. You spend all this time and energy getting a client, they're a client for 6-9 months, and you lose them because you don't have any of the team selling customer service after sales support to keep the customers coming back. There are many ways that firms are short-sighted. Selling could be one of them. The book mentions that the type of salespeople who seek sales jobs often do not have a high level of education or expertise needed to manage more sophisticated selling. Well, I think this was more of a case in the past where a lot of salespeople didn't come out of college in 1970 and 1980. No. Starting in the 90s, starting in 2000s, when we started to move towards CRM, when selling started to get more strategic within the firm, then we started seeing a lot more college graduates. If this is the case, then how do candidates who are qualified find sophisticated selling jobs? Well, there's more sophisticated selling jobs now than there's ever been before. And just looking at the technical requirements, I was just having this conversation with my neighbor across the street, as a matter of fact. He's pretty far up the food chain at Nike when it comes to selling, and he's one of the group of the top 200 salespeople in the entire corporation. Okay? within the last 3 years, he got bumped up into this elite group. This is the most elite people in the entire firm for Nike. They sell, globally. Frank has the Northeast region as his region. Well, there are a number of salespeople that were with Nike from the beginning and know the CEO because the CEO was their buddy and when they were still selling sneakers out of the cars. And these guys did not come out of college to sell. I mean, these guys were just salespeople. The problem is that Nike's having now is now they have all this sophisticated software. They're doing all this sales planning. And these senior salespeople that have been there for so long, they don't do it that way. They're not ready to have the more sophisticated selling. So they end up hiring like a junior assistant to help the senior salesperson get them through their daily tasks. Now, if they didn't have so much loyalty with the firm and loyalty with the CEO, I don't think you either learn the system or you get on board or you get out. But I think there's a couple people that still have the political clout to hang around a little bit longer. If things go badly for Nike, if they have a couple bad quarters, they're going to look to cut. And who do you think they're going to cut first? The salespeople who are not up to speed. Are there any significant advantages for phone interview or Skype interviews over traditional face-to-face interviews? Well, there's convenience, but let me talk about the primary disadvantage for phone or Skype. More than 90% of all communication is nonverbal. Nonverbal means facial expression, tone of voice, body language. You can learn more from nonverbal than you can from verbal in many cases. And when you do a phone interview or you do a Skype interview, you lose some of those nonverbal cues. I mean, if I'm a sales manager and I'm hiring, maybe I can do a screener interview, like a preliminary one. But if I was really considering a candidate, I need to see the whole ball of packet, the whole package. Particularly if I need to know what kind of communication skills this individual has, because they're going to be representing my firm, my product, my services. Can it be helpful? Yes. Is it convenient? Yes. Can it be helpful on the early interviews, the screening ones, to help get people to a smaller subset to then start interviewing in person? Yes. But there are downsides to this, particularly the nonverbal. What is the most necessary part in Salesforce selection? The most necessary part? I don't know if there's one most necessary part. If there's something more specific here you wanted to ask, I'm not sure what we're trying to grab at here. Within the hiring process, how much of a gut reaction regarding a candidate is discounted if it's a structured interview? I mean, regardless of whether the interview has structured questions or unstructured questions, you still have to make some judgment on whether you believe the candidate is going to be a good fit or not. You're going to have to make some forecast based on what you've learned, your past knowledge, previous history. You will have to use your intuition. You could call it a gut reaction. But regardless of whether the interview is structured or unstructured, you're still forecasting. And you get a feel whether you feel better forecasting with this candidate or unsure about forecasting with this candidate. If you're unsure, then your gut's telling you not to hire this person, not to expend the time, energy, and resources. But it's very difficult. It's not an easy thing to do. Usually you need a lot of experience. That's why we have sales managers and HR with lots of experience doing this kind of thing. They've seen 100, 200, 300 salespeople in the last 5 years. Of that couple hundred, they've probably hired 50 or 60. They get a better feel for what type of candidate is a good fit given their personality and what the firm wants. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your energy. Looking forward to seeing you guys all in person on Tuesday.